Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your buddy Chewie, and I am joined once again by my brother from another mother, Mr. Pip. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you? Happy
Good,
holidays to
man.
you and yours.
Likewise, my friend. It's been a while, hasn't it? What? It's been over a month. We
Yeah,
figured
a little
out.
bit over a month. I think right before Thanksgiving was the last time we managed to clear our schedules for such an important event.
Yeah, and so we are. We have gone. We've gotten through Christmas. We are in the week of New Year's at this point. On the night of our recording, what day is it? It's the 28th of December here as we record. So we got just a couple of years left in this shit show that is 2020. So I don't think anybody will be too disappointed to see 2020 leave.
No, not from this side for sure. Ready
Yeah,
to move on to bigger and better things in the next year.
indeed. So there has been a ton that has happened just kind of in the world since we talked. I imagine at least one of those kind of, in my mind, major events we might talk about on this episode. So I'll skip over it here for a minute. Um, let's talk real briefly. Our Hoosiers got screwed out of a big football game, didn't they?
Yeah, they had the season. They had one of the best seasons that they've had since I've been alive, and it's unfortunate that Ohio State's a better team, so we'll give them
Yeah.
that. I do think they're the better team, but I think IU deserved their shot this year and ended up with kind of a lame bowl against a team that hopefully they beat. But at this point, it's a shame to see them not get more recognition for all the hard work that they put in this year because I've never seen them beat so many ranked teams and
Yeah.
Michigan, who's a team that they never beat, all in one
Yep.
season and not really get anything out of it, unfortunately. But
And I mean, and even the game that they lost to Ohio State, I mean, they were in that game till the very end, and they, Ohio State punched them in the mouth early, and they
yeah,
did not stop, which was awesome to see.
yeah,
So
they don't have a bad game this year. I mean, they really don't, which is not something I've ever said about Indiana football. So I'm proud of them no matter what happens. I think at this point, I just want to see them get a bowl win. They've been in the last couple of years is the third straight year that they've gotten in a bowl, and they've lost the last two. So, I don't really care. I just want to see them win at this point and get what they deserve at that when
yeah,
that's done.
living in Ohio in the middle of Buckeye country. It's funny. I remember that day I went to the grocery store early before the game, and I was wearing my Indiana sweatshirt, and the looks that I got walking through the grocery store was just it was an interesting experience for sure. Playing against Ohio State on that day, but I was repping the Hoosiers for sure, as I always do. So
As I would expect, and that's
yeah.
great to hear.
So let's see. Before we get started, do you got a drink you want to share? What are you drinking tonight?
Yeah, sure. So tonight, well, first of all, I'm not drinking gin tonight. I decided to switch to beer, and one of my favorite beers is one of Indiana's finest. If you can see that just a little bit, it's one that you're familiar with. It's called Zombie Dust. It's the pride of Munster, Indiana, up in the region on the northwest side, and it's one of the best, one of the smoothest IPAs I've ever had, and it was really, really hard to come by for a long time, and it's a little bit more prevalent down in Indianapolis now, so we can find it a little easier, but it goes down really smooth, and it's a delicious, tasty beverage. So
It
very
is
good. What about you?
that Zombie Dust is actually one of my favorites. You introduced it to me. Oh, God, it's got to be 5 or 6 years ago at this point. But yeah, one of my favorites that I will pick up every time I have an opportunity to find it. Let's see. Tonight for me is whiskey. Probably won't be able to see it through me, but this is Broken Top Mountain Whiskey. It is from Oregon. I actually got this. I was a part of a whiskey swap on the internet this winter, and it was kind of one of this. It was a classic pyramid scheme where you buy one bottle, and in theory you're supposed to get a bunch of bottles in return. And I actually did. I sent out my bottle, and this was one of the ones that I got. I have no idea who sent it to me. It showed up, from Oregon, postmarked with a name that I did not recognize. So if you're watching, whoever you are, thank you. It's very good. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. So,
Nice. That's awesome.
all right. So we'll get into tonight's episode. If you are watching, you can see on our backgrounds both both Pip and I have similar backgrounds. We are talking tonight about our top 5 favorite Star Wars characters. This is one of those that I think we probably had earmarked on our list of stuff that we wanted to talk about. We are both huge Star Wars nerds. We talked Van Halen the last episode. Star Wars is another one that's kind of near and dear to our hearts. There is a lot going on in the Star Wars universe these days, which I imagine we might get into. But we thought it might be a good idea to, before 2020 wrapped up, we had to hit Star Wars at least once.
Yep, absolutely. And I was really excited to do this. I feel like we could spawn quite a few different Star Wars episodes from this. I would love to talk more about, open conversations about, the original trilogy, the sequel trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and kind of how all those sit, and see after time, how each one of those, kind of rank to you, and whether, they still hold up, or whether they maybe gotten a little bit better, or whatever the case may be. But I think today, a good place to start is some of our favorite characters from the entire series, and not just limited, obviously, to the movies, but any of the books, the games, any of the extended universe, even the non-canonical stuff. I think is fair game with any of this, and this will be a fun little exercise to go through to see if I think this one will most likely have more overlap than we may have in our previous lists, but I'll be interested to see, especially when we get to maybe the few of the more obscure ones, where we sit with that.
For sure. All right, so we're gonna do our top 5, and then I think we each have a couple honorable mentions. So I'll give you the honors. Why don't we start off with your number 5, sir?
All right. Well, my number 5 is, if I had to guess, it's going to be one that's going to be much higher on your list, probably. But my 5 is actually Han Solo. It's a little bit low on the list, maybe, but for me, it's a pretty good fit. I mean, he's who's cooler in the Star Wars universe than Han Solo? I mean, pretty much nobody at this point. Um, he was such an integral figure of the trio in the original trilogy, and of course, had his part in the sequel trilogy. But Harrison Ford just he did such a good job of encapsulating everything that Han Solo had to be. I mean, Harrison Ford is arguably more of a movie star than an actor, and as I would define it. But I mean, he played the part so good, and it was so convincing, and just did a wonderful job. Like, it's no wonder that out of those 3 characters, like, he's the one that character, Han Solo, got the spin-off movie. And he's just one of the best. Like, there's not a movie that he doesn't contribute to, and easily just one of the most exciting characters, and that's why he made my number 5.
Yeah, no, great pick. Han Solo is a character that, for me, I loved in Star Wars, and it's a character that, if you go into the expanded universe, has some really great stories there. And I actually I really enjoyed Solo as a film, as a standalone film. I didn't necessarily think we needed it. I think it answered a lot of questions that we didn't necessarily need answering. But I thought I really enjoyed. Was it Aaron? Aaron, what's the guy's name? I want to say Eckhart, but that's not right. What's the?
I don't remember. I'm blanking on that one.
Aiden Eckenreich, or Aaron Reich, whoever, but the young Han Solo.
Right.
I thought he brought enough Harrison Ford into that character that there was some kind of through lines there, and I actually really liked Harrison Ford's portrayal in the sequel trilogy as well. I thought it might have been a little bit hokey, the way he showed up in Rise of Skywalker, but it was amazing, and I loved it. And so I was a big fan.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that Harrison Ford was a big reason that I was able to not only accept but really enjoy the Force Awakens. Like, he was fantastic in that movie. Like, I was happy that movie had so much of his character in it, because I didn't think that they would feature him very much. But his sort of being there helped sort of indoctrinate all of the other characters and give all the legitimacy to them. And the reintroduction to the Falcon and Chewbacca and all that stuff, like he was a big reason why the Force Awakens worked for me personally. Plenty of arguments could be made on whether that was a good movie or not, but I love that movie because of what he brought to that. And if he hadn't done that, then it wouldn't have been the same experience for me. So I liked Han Solo more after the Force Awakens, brought him back.
I would agree. I would agree. Okay, so let's see. Number 5 for me. I will admit there is certainly some recency effect going on here with this pick. But I actually thought long and hard about this, and I put Din Djarin, aka Mandalorian, as my number 5. This character to me was everything, or is everything, that Boba Fett should have been. Boba, when he was introduced to us in Empire and then kind of went out like a little bitch in Jedi, or at least at the time he did. But Mando is kind of that kind of gunslinger Mandalorian that I always envisioned Boba Fett to be, and I think it has been absolutely awesome to see that realized in the show The Mandalorian. I know that there is a ton of people that really don't like the sequel trilogy, didn't really like the direction or even the prequel trilogy for that matter, didn't really like the direction that the Star Wars kind of screen universe was headed. But I don't know that there's really too many people out there that don't like the Mandalorian show or think it's really, really bad. And I'm one of those. I just, yes, there have been some slow episodes and they're pretty formulaic. But I think that especially the way Pedro Pascal plays him, even when he's got his face covered most of the time. But I just think it's an awesome character, and I'm really pumped to see kind of where they go the next episode or the next season. So
yeah, that's an excellent pick. In fact, that I had to really consider whether or not he would make my honorable mention list, because I've really liked. I mean, I've really liked what they've done with the Mandalorian. It doesn't change my world with Star Wars necessarily, but I really enjoy that character and that contribution. I mean, he sort of brought more legitimacy to the Mandalorians in my mind than Boba Fett ever did. Like I understand that Boba Fett's a lot of people's favorite sort of dark horse character, but I never, it never really attached to me in the same way, and I never really understood sort of the cult following behind it. But I mean, the Mandalorian is there because of Boba Fett. Like that show wouldn't exist if it wasn't for him. And I think that Din Djarin, if that's his name, if I'm saying that right, I think he gave a lot of legitimacy to that, and I think that that show is great. And Pedro Pascal is phenomenal. He's a really good actor. I watched him on Narcos. That's the first thing that I ever saw him on Netflix, and he was so good in that show. And he plays the role great in the series. So I think that's a really solid pick.
Yeah, I do think it's kind of funny that Timothy Oliphant showed up on Mandalorian, because in my mind, when Mando talks, he sounds exactly like Timothy Oliphant. It's just very weird. Like I just always think, if I'm just listening to it, I don't know. So when Oliphant showed up, it was just kind of a,
yeah. I can see that. That's interesting. They have similar cadence to their performance.
Yeah. All right. So number 4 for you, sir.
All right. Well, number 4 is probably my only, or it is my only female entry to the list, and it's of course it's Princess Leia. I think that she as a character was, well, growing up being a Star Wars fan, she was probably the first girl that I ever fell in love with, because she, I was about that age and she showed up in a gold bikini, and my world was never the same after that. So clearly I fell in love with her and wanted to save the universe on her behalf. But, as the years sort of went by, I just thought, looking back, she was a really interesting fit, not just Carrie Fisher from a casting perspective, but the character is very much like Carrie Fisher in that she's just all balls, right? She'll just take charge. She's not the damsel in distress. She's the one that makes fun of her rescuer when he comes in looking too short to be a stormtrooper. And Carrie Fisher as an actress brought all the charisma and the attitude and everything that character needed. And as such, I thought she was just a really great protagonist in that series, and she was really the first heroine that I was ever exposed to, and it really I think it really helped to pave the way for a lot of, female, action stars and things like that. Not that she was an action star in Star Wars, but the Sigourney Weavers of the world and Sarah Connors and Linda Hamilton, that kind of stuff. Like I think that kind of all comes from a lineage that Carrie Fisher was involved with, and I that's why she's one of my favorites. And her performance in The Force Awakens has been argued a lot, but I think that what she was there to contribute while she was still around, I thought she did a great job with, and was just happy to see her back.
Yeah, Leia obviously I think is probably certainly the most iconic female in the Star Wars universe. I was I tell you, I actually really enjoyed a lot of the non-film stuff with Leia. There was a book called Truce at Bakura. I remember that I really enjoyed, and there was another one called The Courtship of Princess Leia, which was kind of a one-off book, but I couldn't even tell you what it was about at this point. But I really remember enjoying that. I really enjoyed the relationship that they explored with her and Han and her kids and those kind of things in the books. I was bummed that we didn't get more of that in the movies. I understand why we didn't. I was totally fine with her appearances in The Force Awakens. I wasn't a huge fan of the way they treated the character in subsequent films, but I get it, right? I mean, she unfortunately had passed away, and they were kind of splicing together footage from from previous films. And I think they, knowing that, I think they did a really good job of that. Obviously the one kind of the most maligned moment of hers that Star Wars nerds bitch about is the Mary Poppins, flying through space kind of thing. But it is what it is. That doesn't really bother me all that bad. So, good choice. So you've got two of the big three already knocked off your list.
Yeah. Spoiler alert: there might be another one on there at some point.
Okay, so my number 4, mine is the Dark Lord himself, the Darth Vader.
Okay.
But I will preface this: it's not Anakin Skywalker. It is Darth Vader. I do not like. And it's not that I didn't like seeing the background or the origin or those kind of things. And I'm not even a Hayden Christensen hater, which I know there's a lot of those out there. I just didn't really care for the Anakin backstory. I loved Vader though. Vader was, he was the big bad, right? Even though in that first movie, in A New Hope, he really had very little screen time, and he actually wasn't the big bad, right? I mean, you got Tarkin, and then you got Emperor, and then but he was always kind of the enforcer. He was the kind of unknown villain, the man behind the black mask. Not to mention the fact that you've got James Earl Jones doing the voice. You've got David Prowse, rest in peace. He just passed away. Providing the kind of the hulking bodybuilder, image. He was just, and he was mysterious, right? I think the more that we learn about Vader, I think that he's lost some of his mystique, at least for me. But when he was just Vader, right? Those first 3 films, or Star Wars, Jedi, and Empire, I absolutely love that character, and I will throw in his appearance in Rogue One, which I think that movie I love, and that sequence I love even more because that was the Vader that I kind of had in my mind, right? It was the suited Vader. It was kicking ass. It was using the Force. It was throwing the lightsaber. It was just being the terror that the galaxy was afraid of, and that's the Darth Vader that I is number 4 on my list.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's hard to argue with that. It's funny. I don't know if you've ever seen, I'm sure you have some of the not the outtakes, but some of the raw footage before James Earl Jones put his voice on it, and it was David
It's
Prowse
bad.
talking like this high-pitched English accent, and it was just like, oof, man. I mean, give Lucas props, man. He had vision. I mean, because like if I was on set and I was recording that, I'd be like, this, we're screwed, man. This movie's going in the tank.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, yeah, that's a fantastic pick. And James Earl Jones. I mean, if Disney had any sense about them, they would sit down with James Earl Jones before he dies and have him record every single word in the English vocabulary so that they can
Yep.
continue to use this dialogue for years to come, because it's not Darth Vader without James Earl Jones, in my opinion. And I
Yeah.
feel like your commentary on the Rogue One thing, I think that's what made people remember how much of, well, I mean, not even remember, but I mean, like Darth Vader was never a badass in the sense of fighting in the original
No.
trilogy, because he really only ever fought Luke, and that was it. And they were
Yep.
great fights, but I mean, they were choreographed in a very specific way where he wasn't meant to be a badass. But I think there's a lot more story there that they would explore. And personally, I'm shocked that Disney didn't go right into a Darth Vader series about, I mean, there's a lot of material there to mine about how he went and killed all the Jedi after the Clone Wars and after he became Darth Vader. And I hope we get that in some level at some point someday. But I mean, yeah, that's a fantastic pick for sure.
All right, sir. Number 3.
All right. Well, my number 3 is near and dear, and also very closely associated with Darth Vader. It is the Emperor Sheev Palpatine himself. In Jedi, his character. I was really excited about the prequel trilogy because I love the fact that they got Ian McDiarmid back. Who, I mean, you can't say enough about Ian McDiarmid and his performance as the Emperor, because if it wasn't for how menacing and sadistic he played that part, like it just wouldn't have the same effect or the same gravitas. But we were introduced to him, of course, in Return of the Jedi, that actor playing that role anyways. But and I don't even know if I can really explain or describe why I'm so drawn to his character. But I think the prequel trilogy really helped amp that up for me, because I really liked, there were a lot of things I didn't like about the prequel trilogy, but all of the Ian McDiarmid, all of the Emperor related stuff, or the Chancellor related stuff, I just thought that was really fun, and it was really cool to see sort of his progression. Like the prequel trilogy was supposed to be about Darth Vader and his descent, from Anakin Skywalker to Darth Vader. But I really think the more interesting storyline, the way that it ended up working out, shouldn't have been this way, but it was the Emperor's rise to power and how he was behind the scenes pulling all the strings. And I thought that was great. And yeah, you can make arguments all day long about how ridiculous it was. He just magically showed up in Rise of Skywalker, and I couldn't argue with any of it. But I didn't give a shit, because it was so cool to see him again. Like,
awesome.
It was badass. Like they amped it, they cranked it to 11, man. It was so cool, and they made him look cool. He sounded great. Like, I didn't even care that there was no plausible reason that guy should even be there. Although, spoiler alert, the Mandalorians tried to tell that backstory right now.
Yeah.
I loved it. I thought it was great. I could watch him play the Emperor, and I mean, if the Emperor showed up on a Christmas holiday special just to, zap all the people in church or something, like, I would watch that, because I love that character and I love everything he's done. So Palpatine is my number 3.
No, it's a good pick. I know there's a lot of folks that are kind of our age that really didn't like Rise of Skywalker. They thought it wasn't a very satisfying conclusion, and to your point, there was plot holes, and why is Palpatine here? And I really enjoyed that movie, and I think one of the main reasons for it was because of Palpatine, right? It was, he is the, he's the big bad that we needed, right? He's the big bad that trilogy needed. And I think it kind of sucked that we didn't get in until the third movie. But I think when he came back, and to your point, I mean, they made him look awesome. They made him sound great. I don't even know how old Ian McDermott actually is, but I hope he's younger than he looks, because man, I would love to see him reprise that role over and over and over again. He's just really, really good at it. So a great pick.
He's 76, by the way.
Okay, all right.
So I don't know if we'll see him as the Emperor much longer or much more, but God, I hope there's an opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. We're up to number 3, huh?
Yes.
My number 3, you might think, I have a feeling we're coming up into some overlap territory. We might be flip-flopping some numbers or what have you, but my number 3 is the son of Darth Vader, Mr. Luke Skywalker. Luke is a character that, I mean, the first couple movies, right? That they're about Vader, they're about Anakin, but they're Luke's movies in my mind, right? Yes, it is the redemption of Anakin, but it is the rise of Luke Skywalker, right? It's him becoming a Jedi Knight. It is his kind of realization, and it's the typical kind of hero's journey, right? He starts out as a kind of a whiny little bitch, and he's going to Tashi Station to pick up some power converters and this, that, and the other thing, right? And he becomes, and at the end he stands tall and he throws his saber away and he says, "I'm a Jedi like my father before me." And that particular scene right there where Luke stands tall was everything to me in Jedi. It was absolutely everything to me, and I'm getting goosebumps right now talking about it. And it's really ironic that we are recording this episode, I don't know, a week or so after the greatest episode of Mandalorian that I can think of, because Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker, showed up in all of his glory. Similar to the way Rogue One showed Vader being a badass, Mandalorian finally showed Jedi Luke Skywalker being a badass. And I'm not. That's not to say that we didn't get a little bit of that with him on the Jedi's, or on Jabba's sail barge and against Vader, but I think there was no coincidence that the way Jedi Master Luke Skywalker mowed through those dark Death Troopers, they were, I think, it was very reminiscent of the Vader scene in Rogue One. In fact, I've seen a couple of YouTube edits where they put them together, and it's just awesome. But Luke is, Luke. When I think of Jedi, that's what I think of. I think of Luke Skywalker. And yeah, I love that character, and I was so happy to see him return in Mandalorian, and I think that's part of the reason that I said earlier on my number 5 pick that there's some recency there, but that the inclusion of that character elevates that entire show and elevates every other character in that show. Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, I mean that's a no-brainer, and I guess it might make sense for me to not only justify your choice, but to ease into my number 2, which is also Luke Skywalker, just for the sake of efficiency. I mean, you made a good point that I was going to make, which is, the original trilogy is really about Luke Skywalker. I mean, it featured the redemption of Anakin Skywalker, but we didn't really know who Anakin was, and I don't really think that was the intent when things kind of started. This was really more the opportunity to tell the hero's journey story, that the Campbellian archetype, line of storytelling that we've heard George Lucas talk about for so long, and that was really about Luke Skywalker. And when I was a kid, I didn't want to be anybody but Luke Skywalker. I wanted a lightsaber. I wanted to be able to move things with my mind, and do all that kind of stuff. And Luke was a big reason. And Luke, to me, was sort of the he was the untainted. He was the pure one, right? Like I liked Luke Skywalker the same reason I liked Superman. You know, like those guys, they were good people. They were the Boy Scouts of their respective stories, and um, I wanted to be them. I wanted to be Luke Skywalker when I grew up. And he seeing him in the Mandalorian was great. I'd have to say that the way that they used him in the sequel trilogy was, I still don't know how I feel about it. I still don't think I love it because it took all those things that I loved about him as a kid and it turned them completely on their head.
Yep.
And at first I thought it was really brave for them to make that choice. And then looking back, I'm like, I just don't know. It for me, and again, we can have a whole nother podcast about the sequel trilogy and what that meant and whether it was worth it and did we get what we wanted and all that stuff. But for me, it was weird to not have him featured more in that because the original trilogy was about Luke. And I think the Russo brothers, the guys that are famous for doing the Marvel movies, recently came out and said, if they had been in charge of it, they would have featured Luke. It would have been about Luke and his story, the continuation of his story. And I think that would have made more sense to me to do it that
Mhm.
way. And I didn't love looking back, I don't want to bash Ryan Johnson. I just didn't love the way that they used him in The Last Jedi, and it really sort of tainted the legacy, in my opinion. And I think that they repaired that a little bit in Rise of Skywalker, but he didn't really have any significant part in there. So, not to ramble too long, but because it's my number two as well. I mean, I can't say enough about Luke and how important he was as a fictional role model slash hero when I was a young kid because it was you know, to me, I'd still like to be Luke Skywalker if I could. I think that would be
Absolutely.
great. And there's so much material that they could explore. I really wish that they would have done a sequel trilogy about 10 to 15 years sooner, right? Because to see, I mean, there's so much that happened with Luke between when the second Death Star went kablooey to, when he started training Ben Solo and all that stuff. I mean, there's a wealth of material that they could go through, and the extended universe talked about that a lot. And it would be so cool if Mark Hamill was young enough to reprise his role, in a way that would be possible. But it is what it is. But yeah, Lucas is
Yeah.
is my number two.
Yeah, I think I think I'm right on board with you in terms of what how they treated the character in Last Jedi. I was more than a little upset that they killed him. I like you. I thought that it was brave at the time. I do like the way they quote retcon some of that a little bit in the Rise of Skywalker. I think the Rise of Skywalker version of Luke, for as small as it was what Jedi Master Luke should have been, right? A little bit more wise, a little bit less wisecracking, a little
Yes.
bit more reverent to the Jedi Order, as opposed to the kind of grumpy hermit Luke that we got in the Last Jedi. But I suppose that's kind of the version of Yoda we got in Empire as well, right? The hermit, not quite as wisecracky. Well, I don't know. That's
A
another
little bit.
discussion for another day. Yeah,
Yeah,
a
no,
little
I
bit.
mean, I think there's some really interesting parallels to be drawn there, and I'm sure that there was some intention behind that. I think I don't really feel like that was a beat that needed to be repeated with Luke. I
Yeah,
didn't think he needed to turn into Yoda. I think it should have been, and I don't care that he died for whatever it's worth, but I don't think that time that way was really what they needed. I mean, it needed to be. I would have liked to see his character get carried into Rise of Skywalker so that he could actually make some sort of significant contribution into trying to you know finish the third movie somehow, whatever
right,
that story would have been had JJ done all three of them. So I mean, we'll never know what that actually is, and that's for another podcast
right,
probably. But yeah,
right.
I agree with that.
Okay, so I guess we're to my number two then,
Correct.
which so with my Darth Vader pick, which was number four, I said that it was very specific. It was just Darth Vader. It was not Anakin Skywalker. With this pick, my number two, it's a character that encompasses not just the original trilogy, but absolutely the prequel trilogy. It is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Um, Alec Guinness was the kind of the old wizard that was Jedi, right? He was our first. He gave us a lot of background of what the Jedi were. He was the first Jedi that we met. He kind of filled in a lot of the pieces. Um, he was the first Force ghost that we heard. He was the first Force, the first Force voice that we heard. Um, but in my mind, Ewan McGregor is Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I cannot tell you how fucking pumped I am for the Obi-Wan show, because Ewan McGregor is back. He wants to be, he's excited to be there. For everything that the prequels were, Ewan McGregor's performance in all three of those movies, in my mind, stands out, especially in Revenge of the Sith, because they did an amazing job, in my mind, of bridging the gap between Ewan McGregor and Alec Guinness. He looked like him, he talked like him, he had his mannerisms, and I think universally, I don't think there's anybody that will say that Ewan McGregor was not the best part of the prequels. But that character, I mean, he was a badass. He was a good fighter. He used the Force. He was wise. I love Obi-Wan. In my mind, he's got the best lightsaber out there. That's my favorite one, the one that he uses in Revenge of the Sith, and I guess he uses it in A New Hope as well. But yeah, Obi-Wan he's my dude. He's my favorite Jedi out there.
I mean, that's a solid pick. I think I remember seeing it. I don't remember what website it was, but like they basically said, like, who are the best Jedi? Like, legitimately the best Jedi. I'm like, well, you can make an argument that Yoda was the best, but Yoda was also he had his moments, right? Like where he didn't make some of the best decisions, and even Qui-Gon probably should have listened a little bit better when it came to trying to train Anakin and things like that. But when they go back, I think Obi-Wan is typically universally, one of the most appreciated Jedi of the series, and I agree with you 100%. Ewan McGregor is one of the better actors that came out of that original trilogy, and I'm just disappointed they didn't come out of the gate with that one. Like, The Mandalorian's great, and I don't have any problems with it, but man, I wanted that Obi-Wan Kenobi series or that movie. I think we thought we were going to get a trilogy, and then it was going to be a movie, and now it's a series. But I'm so excited about that. But his character was a really important guiding post for Luke, to get to that next level, and then it showed a lot about his involvement with Anakin in the beginning, and he failed Anakin to some degree as well because of the relationship and the things that were going on, and I'm sure he would have done things differently had he had an opportunity to go back. But I mean, that's a great choice, and I'm so excited. I'm glad they're bringing Hayden Christensen back. I don't think he'll have a huge part in that show. I mean, I'm sure to some degree he will, but I cannot wait. Like, I think at this point it's not even going to be. Is it 2021 that it's supposed to come out, or is it going to be like early 2022?
I'm not sure. I mean, all that with COVID, everything is so messed up. I'm really not sure, but I can't wait. I can't wait. It's gonna be awesome.
It's gonna be so good.
All right, so we've arrived at your number one. What
all right,
lay it on.
Well, my number one is one that you have already mentioned, and one that would be very painful omission had I not put it on here. But it is Darth Vader. I think Darth Vader is my favorite character of the Star Wars universe, and I tried not to gush about him when you were talking about him because I didn't want to give it away. But yeah, I mean, I really honestly don't think there's a better villain in cinematic history. I just don't. I don't think you could name one who is more iconic and more imposing and just cool. I mean, he's just really cool from top to bottom. You know, you talked about James Earl Jones, who provided his voice, and I still to this day, you know, get chills when he talks for the first time in like each one of the movies. You know, especially like the difference between the way he sounds in Empire and the way he sounds in Jedi, and like the technology and how his voice just got stronger and things like that. I could sit there and just watch it all day long. He terrified me as a kid, but I fell in love with him as an adult, and I got so excited when they were going to tell the prequel stories about Anakin Skywalker and his descent into Darth Vader. And I'm one of the people who doesn't think that that went as well as it probably should have, especially in Revenge of the Sith when the moment happens, and I felt like
Terrible.
that ball was fumbled kind of poorly.
That
Um,
was terrible. Yeah.
and that was so disappointing that I didn't get like the, you know, I mean, he had like over 6 hours of movie time over three different stories to figure it out, and it just seemed like, wow, we it's almost like we forgot about that. We focused too much on the Trade Federation and all that stuff.
Yep.
But at any rate, like, and this is another one. I'm shocked they haven't had a Darth Vader series. I can't believe that they haven't really made more of an attempt to make more of a tell more canon-based stories on Darth Vader. And I hope that that changes. Obviously, we're going to get him back for the Obi-Wan Kenobi stuff. I hope that doesn't feel like it's just kind of crammed in there, because there's really maybe no need to have them fight again or be involved. But I mean, I don't care. I just want to just, you know, take my money, shut up and take my money. But
Right.
I don't think you can name a better, more iconic villain in film history. I mean, there's plenty of them out there, but Darth Vader is just, you know, he's in our hearts and minds and on our bed sheets and
Yep.
you know, everything
No,
else.
yeah, that would be another really good podcast episode, just top villains. I think you're right. I don't know. I don't know that I could name a more iconic. I mean, even people that call him Dark Vader, they know who he is, right?
Right.
You know, I mean, he is, and I will agree with you wholeheartedly on the way that the final turn was handled. I think it was bad. It was just, and I'll tell you what, it was funny. So when those prequel movies came out, I was of the opinion that the only good redeeming one was Revenge of the Sith, and then I went back and I rewatched them several years later with my wife, and she had never seen any of them, and I totally changed my tune on that because I think Revenge of the Sith had that movie had one job, and it fucked it up since like really
Yeah,
really bad. I
really.
mean,
It's like
he
mind-boggling. Like,
yeah
what the hell just happened?
yeah. I mean, he literally went from um he went from I love my wife to what have I done, and killing younglings in the matter of like eight
Murdering
minutes.
children in the
Yeah,
span
I
of
mean,
like 10 minutes.
it just and I'm not suggesting that there isn't a way to get that character there clearly is, but to your point, you had 9 hours to do it, and you did it in 8 minutes, and it didn't make any sense. You know, I guess I would have, if it were me, I probably would have started at Phantom Menace with an adolescent or an older Anakin. I would have done without the 8-year-old boy version, or 6-year-old, or you know, whatever he was. And I would have told that story. I would have kind of shown more more sand people type issues, right? Where he, you know, goes to the dark side and taps into the dark side, and does that. And rather than, you know, and then it wouldn't have been a surprise, right? It wouldn't have been a surprise when he, you know, turned on Mace and fell to his knees and pledged his allegiance.
Right.
Um, but as it was, it didn't make a lot of sense. That being said, it's he's the greatest villain ever, right? And so and even a shitty turn in the third movie doesn't take that away. He's that
Exactly.
badass.
And that's
Yeah.
what I was going to say, is that that shows you the power of how important he was to film, is that like they did really drop the ball on that, but it
Yeah.
doesn't change my, like,
Doesn't
I don't
matter.
hold that against Darth Vader. Like, it's still he's still one of the most important villains to ever be on the screen. And you know, he's fantastic. I can't even say enough about him. He's pretty amazing.
All right. So my number one then has already been touched on, but it is none other than Han Solo. Han Solo to me he's the everyman, right? He's a non-Jedi in a film series all about Jedi. He's a non-believer, right? Um, and he's all about hokey religions and ancient weapons, right? But he wants a good blaster at your side. I remember growing up on the playground, I was always Han Solo. I wanted to be Han Solo. I wanted to be in the Millennium Falcon. I wanted to have the blaster. Those kind of things. Um, Harrison Ford. I mean, what can you say about Harrison Ford? He is arguably one of the I don't know. We should do this list too. He's probably one of my top 5 actors of all time, not Star Wars, but just actors. Um, we talk about iconic roles that dude has played. We could go on for days. Um, but and again, I think the sequel trilogy. I love the inclusion in the sequel trilogy. Harrison Ford has famously he wanted Han Solo to die in Return of the Jedi. He finally got his wish in The Force Awakens. I loved seeing him in Rise of Skywalker. Absolutely loved it. Did it make a whole lot of sense that Han would be a quote Force ghost? No, he probably wasn't. It was probably a memory or whatever. Whatever. It didn't matter. Um, when that scene came on, there was 2 or 3 scenes in that movie that absolutely got me. Just as at the time I was a 40-something-year-old guy. That was one of them. It was amazing, and it just added to the legacy of that character for me. I mean, um, just there's so many iconic things that dude says and does, and that was one of them, right? With his son standing out on the bridge of the Death Star. What 2 movies after his son stood on another bridge and killed him, right? It was just it's an iconic character, and I just Han Solo's the man. Love him.
Yeah, I mean, can't argue with any of that. Obviously, he was on my list too. I think that it's interesting that he's so beloved that nobody seemed to. One of the criticisms that I kind of thought I would hear, but nobody ever really said, was that Han Solo didn't really turn out to be that great of a guy either. If you look at him in The Force Awakens, right? Because I mean, maybe that's not fair, but you know what I'm saying. Like he kind of goes back to his scoundrel ways. Like he's not married to Princess Leia anymore. He's not a part of her world. He's not in the military as part of the resistance or anything like that. Like he's sort of detached himself from all of that and gone back to some of his ways that he was, some of his lifestyle that he was dealing with when he was before New Hope and all that kind of stuff. And but it doesn't change the character, because at his core, he's there to to save the day. And his relationship with Chewbacca and all of that stuff is it's fantastic, and it's so well done in that third in that sequel trilogy. He's one of the greatest. Like I know we're gonna get here someday, but my biggest beef with the sequel trilogy is that him and Luke never share any screen time together.
Yeah,
that crushed me. It really crushed me, and I know it crushed Mark Hamill too, because he talked about it. But they swung and missed on a huge opportunity there. I understand why they killed him. I didn't expect him to live much past that first movie, because I didn't think he wanted to be doing Star Wars movies. But man, to see Han and Luke team up again for one more movie would have been it would have ignited the fire in my fanboy belly like nothing else. But Han's the greatest. I mean, you're right. He doesn't fit into that universe at all, and I think that's what sort of gives him all the charm that he has. Is that
yeah.
he knows he doesn't fit in there, but somehow that makes him fit in even more.
All right. You got a couple of honorable mentions for us.
I do, yeah. So I'll start with one, and this is where it'll get more interesting. My top 5 is pretty much greatest hits, but this is where we get into the B-sides a little bit, at least for me, anyways. So my first honorable mention was name dropped in the 2nd season of The Mandalorian this year, which got me super fucking pumped. and
I
it's
know it.
none other than Grand Admiral Thrawn himself,
Yep.
and I'm so excited. Uh, so a little background on Thrawn for the two of you that may be watching this that have never heard of him. He originally appeared in the no longer canon Legends series by Timothy Zahn back in the early 90s in a book called Heir to the Empire. I believe that was the first one. You introduced
So
me to
good.
those books. They were fantastic, read them all. But he was made canon in 2016 on the show Rebels. So he became a part of the Star Wars universe officially. And he has, I don't know if you've read these, I've read two of the three, but there's a new trilogy of books by Timothy Zahn that focus on Grand Admiral Thrawn and it's called the Thrawn Ascendancy. And it kind of talks about his background and there are stories about him with Darth Vader and things like that, like really, really good stuff. But he was name dropped on The Mandalorian when Ahsoka finally made her appearance. And that's all I needed to hear to know that he was going to end up on that show or one of their shows here in the very near future. And I'm really excited about that because he's just a really fun character. He's another Emperor / Darth Vader type, very very diabolical. He's really more of a thinker than he is a fighter in that respect. But just the way that he's written in the books is really, really interesting, and I can't wait to see him adapted on screen. And a lot of people are saying Benedict Cumberbatch is going to play him. I really hope I'm Camp Michael Fassbender. I think he would be a fantastic choice for that, and that's who I'm pulling for. But who knows? The guy who actually voiced him on the Clone Wars shows, I think, is getting consideration too. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, Grand Admiral Thrawn, highly underrated character, and then he's my first honorable mention.
All right, good pick. I'm gonna go. With Poe Dameron. Poe Dameron. Um, Poe to me is actually a little bit like Han Solo. Now that I think about it, right? He's a character that doesn't really fit into that universe. He's kind of the hotshot flyboy. He's super sarcastic. He's got some of the not that Star Wars is comedy at all, but he's got some of the funniest one-liners in all three of those sequel movies. Um, I actually don't know a ton about that character outside of what's on those, in those three movies. But I really enjoyed Oscar Isaacs every time he showed up on screen. He didn't take me out of the movie at all. He left me wanting more. I wanted to know more about that character. I always felt good when he was on that screen. And I thought he did, what he did was he brought an air, and I think I said it with Han, he's the everyman, right? He when um when Ray and Finn would be kind of, getting too close in his opinion, or getting kind of too mystical with the Force, he would always say something that would just kind of bring you back to reality, right?
Yeah, right.
He was the Ron of the Hermione, Ron, and Harry Potter trilogy, right? Like he was the just the kind of the normal one of the three. So I was a big fan of Poe Dameron. I really hope that they do something else with that character in the future. But it was probably, other than the characters that we already knew, the Hans and Leia's and Luke's, was probably my favorite character of the sequel trilogy. So
I think that's a really good choice, and I think that of the new characters, he was a big part of the glue that sort of made me really respect, um, the new trilogy, because I think, what the decision to go with newer characters or to focus on newer characters in the new trilogy was kind of a brave one, right? Because you're taking three of the most iconic film characters of all time, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Princess Leia, and making them sit in the back seat to these new people. And that in my mind is a very brave move, and maybe in hindsight not the best one, but it was what it was. The point was, well, like when I finished watching The Force Awakens, I was just as interested in Poe Dameron and Ray and Finn as I was the original characters. Like that's how much excitement
mhm.
and energy they brought to it. And Oscar Isaacs was phenomenal. Like he fit in that role better than any of the new characters did, in my opinion. He just seemed so natural in that, and his camaraderie with Finn was sort of teased. Like they only spent a little amount of time together in that first movie, but like you just wanted more. Like you just want more of that vibe and that energy there that he brought to that. And Oscar deserves all the credit for it because of the way that he played that character. So I think that's a really solid choice. And he's one of the characters that I think that I liked equally throughout that entire series, right? Like Finn, I
Yeah.
didn't really care for the way that his character sort of got played out towards the end. I don't know why. I don't know the reasons. I haven't really analyzed it yet, but and Rey was okay, but Rey sort of went up and down a little bit too, based off of her storyline with Luke and the parents, no parents, but no, I got parents again, kind of thing. That was a little, but Poe, who probably got the least amount of actual story behind what he was doing, was the most consistent and had sort of the responsibility of being the anchor of that group, in my opinion.
I agree. Yep. All right, you got one more, sir. Who is
All right,
it?
this last one's going to be, it's going to be a little obscure, but it's going to be one I think that you'll appreciate. And this is another one that started non-canonical and I think still is, unless I'm mistaken, and it is Darth Bane.
Oh, yeah.
Darth Bane had a trilogy of books published, I think started in 2006 is when the first one came out. And the guy's name is Drew Karpyshyn. I don't know how to pronounce his name. But Darth Bane was, well, first of all, I should say that these books, I flew through them. They're great reads. They're super fun. And Darth Bane was one of the biggest badass Sith Lords that has ever existed. And he is credited, again, all non-canonical at this point, but he is credited with doing the rule of two, which is, basically the unwritten rule that the Sith can only exist in pairs because when he was a Sith, he basically created this rule and forced the Sith to do this because there was so much infighting with the Sith that they were destroying each other and tearing each other apart, as evidenced by the fact that almost every Sith gets killed by his master or his apprentice, I should say, excuse me. And he was one of them. But he was a complete badass. And those books are really, really fun. It's a good read. I'm hoping that there's a lot of talk about the Star Wars movies that are going to be made in the future. I think Rian Johnson's got another trilogy that he's making, and they haven't really said what it's going to be about, but they've sort of teased Knights of the Old Republic kind of stuff, which would be the era that he's from. He's actually from about 1,000 years before the Clone Wars ever take place, so there's no chance that he would cross paths with any of the others. But the books are really great reads. I'd recommend them to anybody who hasn't read them. Even though they're not really part of the canon anymore. But Darth Bane is my second and final honorable mention.
That's a good pick. That's a good pick. All right, so my last honorable mention. It's funny. I'm shocked. I'm actually shocked that he's in this list. But it's Kylo Ren / Ben Solo.
Very controversial.
Yeah, absolutely. Kylo was a character, that killed my favorite character of the Star Wars universe, right? Killed his dad, right? And I remember you and I even had conversations before Rise of Skywalker came out, where we were talking about theories and what might happen, and we were basically like, well, there's no way they can redeem Kylo Ren because he killed Han Solo. Like there's no way he can do it. And I don't know that they did a sufficient job, but they almost got there with me, right? They when he turned back to Ben, right? And again, I think a lot of it was that scene with Harrison Ford where he showed up on the Death Star, and it was that father-son moment, right? That we finally got that moment. But Kylo Ren was the one character that really kind of had a character arc in that sequel trilogy, right? I suppose, yeah, you could make the argument that Rey is really the kind of the main character, but I mean Kylo has that same arc as well, right? I mean he's a villain, and then he's a super villain, and then he's got kind of a redemption towards the end, right? I I love the fact he actually has no dialogue after he becomes Ben Solo. He doesn't say a single word other than "ow." I think he jumps and he like, but he doesn't say a single word. He gives up his life to save Rey at the end. Spoiler alert, I'm sure everybody's watching this has seen these movies. If not, we spoiled the fuck out of them anyways. But which is right, the heroic thing to do. I was never a fan of the romantic relationship between Rey and Ben Solo or Kylo Ren. So the kiss at the end there kind of bummed me out a little bit, but I just like the character. I look back on that sequel trilogy. I wish they would have done some more with. I wish they would have shown us more between Luke and Kylo Ren. In the training sequences and that kind of thing. I wish they would have shown us some more with the Knights of Ren and what that was and who they were. And I suppose that's part of the reason why he's on my list, right? I want more. I just thought he was a badass character, and I thought they did a good job with him.
That's a good choice. I mean, it's hard to, I would say, with the newer characters like with Poe and with Kylo, I feel like you really have to give a lot of credit to the actors that were there, because that's really our only exposure to them, right? Like we don't have a lot of extended universe material to sort of feed off of. I think Adam Driver is going to be one of the most incredible actors of his generation when all is said and done. I think he's really that good. And if you guys haven't seen him in anything else, then make the time to do so, because there's a lot of people that were very critical of his performance as Kylo, or maybe more so critical of just Kylo's character and his whininess and his. But I think that there's a really interesting angle to him that he was wearing a mask. He didn't need a mask. He was doing that because he was trying to be Darth Vader. Like he was trying to be something that he wasn't. He was trying to talk himself into that the whole time. And I actually thought his redemption was pretty reasonable. And yeah, we did talk a lot about that, because I'm like, I don't know, how they're going to redeem him. That you can't redeem him for killing the most beloved character in the entire universe. But there's one person who could do that, and it was Han Solo himself. And yeah, you could argue that that was sort of wedged in there and it felt kind of forced, and maybe it was just an opportunity to get Harrison Ford back. But I went with it, and by the end of Rise of Skywalker, I was actually fine with the fact that Ben Solo became Ben Solo again, and it was because of that made that happen. But I agree that I would like more background. I would have liked a lot more of what happened between Kylo, between like The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, because there's a whole storyline about how that planet that he's on and at the beginning of Rise of Skywalker is Mustafar. Like he goes back there to get the holocron, or not the holocron. What's that called? The whatever the thing is, the wayfinder. The wayfinder. So he goes back, and he's supposedly according to the book, like he meets some other bad guy and fights somebody else down there, all that stuff. Like I think that there was more in sort of the pathology between him and Darth Vader and all that stuff that they could have explored more. But they didn't. They crammed about as much as they possibly could in Rise of Skywalker. But I liked his redemption story. If anything, I wanted a little bit more of him as Ben Solo. Like I would have liked to have seen him do that. And while the love thing was, I agree that felt weird. It's not the weirdest kiss I've seen in the Star Wars movie. So I'm willing to brush it off and say maybe it wasn't even meant to be romantic, as weird as that might sound. I'll give him a pass on that, because weird kisses is kind of what Star Wars is all about. So whatever, I can forgive that one. It was a nice moment that I felt like it was much easier to forgive him than it was Darth Vader in retrospect, with the whole killing children thing, which may have been far. But fair. Yeah, that's solid. That's a good choice.
All right, we got through it. We got top fives. We got honorable mentions. I have a feeling that we will be discussing Star Wars more than once in subsequent episodes, for sure.
I would very much like that.
So, all right. Well, hey, we've rambled on for about an hour. I hope everything is good on your end. Happy holidays, happy New Year, and then we'll talk to you soon, my brother.
Same to you. Same to our 406 family. Hope everyone had a great holiday season, and we will hopefully see you soon with more to come.
All right, late. Have a good one.